Ladies and gentlemen, we now resume the afternoon session and we invite to the floor Walter Uptmoor, German specialist expert in stained glass restoration, studied art history in Munich, international consultant of art. Walter participated in many important projects of restoration in Latin America, Argentina, Chile, Spain, and Brazil. And he's a guest expert for the restoration project of stained glass in the Candelaria Church in Rio de Janeiro. His topic is the art of stained glass and mosaic in architecture. We have a Q&A session after the presentation. Online audience may send their questions via chat. Welcome to the floor, Walter Uptmoor. Thank you, Eliana. Good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in this seminar. I would like to thank the Brotherhood of Candelaria to invite me to take part in this extension course for the restoration of stained glass of the Candelaria Church. And also I thank the organizers who are responsible for this event this year. The topic of my presentation is the art of stained glass and mosaic in architecture. But prior to that, I will talk about the history of the Meyer and Zettler studios and the art of stained glass and mosaic. Here in this image we may see the Maya Studios in Munich at Studio Meyerplatz, built in 1847. Unfortunately, it was taken down in 1944 during the Second World War, and on the right we can see the current building built in 1923. We have a few images of the Maya Studios workshops, the modern side for float glass, and the founder, Joseph Gabriel Meyer, founded the company in 1847 as an institution for Christian or artistic works. In the first stage, he produced sacred projects and objects like altars, paintings. Joseph Gabriel Meyer wished to produce works of art in the late Gothic style, and he was inspired in the organization of medieval craftsmen. Franz Borges Meyer, the son of Joseph Gabriel, transformed the Meyer in one of the most important workshops in the market, with branches in Paris, Dublin, New York, and in 1882 the King Louis II from Baviera granted the title of the Royal House as an institution of painting, art and painting over glass. And then he was nominated as the Pontifical Institution for Christian Art at the time for the production of sculptures. Joseph Navel, the artistic director of the Meyer Studio from 1858 onwards. Navel was a sculptor from South Tyrol and professor of the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Munich. And he was responsible for the artistic design of sculptures and altars produced by the Meyer Studio. The production of altars was very important, and there were altars and works distributed throughout the world. Many, and one of them is installed today in the Cathedral of Santiago de Chile, an altar built in 1913. Franz Xavier Zettler was the son-in-law of Joseph Gabriel Meyer and established the stained glass department in 1863 in the Meyer Studio together with Franz Borges Meyer. And in 1870 he founded his own independent company. Here we can see signatures from Zettler and Meyer Studios, as was the custom at that time. Here an image of the Meyer Studios around the 1900s. It was a workshop that employed as many as 300 craftsmen. One of the most important commissions at the time was a reconstruction of the Holy Spirit window in 1910 for St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Also, the church, St. Mary's Church in Landsberg in Germany, with stained glass by the Meyer Studio from 1885. And the style characterizing that, the work of the studio, was found in churches throughout the world, and it's known as the Munich style, and it is distinguished by its classical treatment of the human figure and its richly decorated natural backgrounds. The Munich style originates from the Nazarene movement in the case of stained glass, and it may be described as idealized naturalism. One of Zettler's studio's most significant achievements was the stained glass decoration of the Scala Papale in the Vatican in 1891. Also something typical of that time, we can see here stained glass windows from the Oaxaca Cathedral in Mexico, Zettler Studio windows, almost identical copies of the Scala Papale pieces. Another piece for Mexico, Archangel Gabriel for the Basilica Cathedral of Puebla from 1905. Franz Borges and F.X. Zettler succeeded and attracted many painters and professors of historical painting from the Munich Academy of Fine Arts to collaborate in the production of their stained glass windows. And there was division by speciality of work. So some craftsmen selected the glass, others cut glass, others assembled, and others leaded the panels. And there were specialized painters focused on architecture, drapery, and ornamentation. And also the lead group, which were the figure painters. At the end of the First World War, Franz Borges Meyer transferred the management of the company to his three sons, Anton, Karl, and Adalbert. At that time, the importance of artists was very high, and under influence of the developments at the time, the company decided to place its technical expertise and craftsmanship at the service of contemporary artists. Gradually, the Meyer and Zettler studios became a workshop for artists. From then on, Meyer and Zettler studios no longer imposed their distinctive style of work, and they offer experience, technical knowledge, materials, machinery, and workshops for artists. And they started to do more collaboration work. Important works from those days after the First World War were works of Joseph Oberberger in 1934 for the Luxembourg Cathedral, or works from Karl Knapper in 1936. In 1944, Second World War and the destruction caused by area bombing of most of the company's facilities. That was the lowest point of their history. In 1939, Meyer and Zettler had merged, but their buildings and workshops were almost completely destroyed during an air raid in April 1944. Unfortunately, nearly the entire archive, including order books, cartoons, and correspondence, was lost, was destroyed. However, both companies resumed production in 1946. Thanks to the determination of the third generation, the business recovered remarkably. And from 1946 onwards, the annual sales reached approximately the same level as in 1932. Following the end of the Second World War, Europe entered a period of reconstruction of various churches, replacing those that had been destroyed, as we can see in an image of the Munich Cathedral. On the left, before 1930 and after its destruction in 1944. In this case, this was an opportunity for many artists to design modern stained glass windows for churches, both for newly constructed churches and restored historic buildings. However, in some cases, unfortunately, these interventions were not always good for the architectural side. Here we see an example from the Munich Cathedral, 1960. Other works from those days: St. Conrad Church, Munich, 1956, Würzburg Cathedral by Professor Nagel, 1967, and St. Rupert Church, Georg Schönberger, from 1965. Regarding the influence of artistic movements from the early 20th century, then the language of stained glass underwent a transformation, and we can see a distancing from the traditional style of painting from the 19th century and from this naturalistic ornamental. Then we had a more abstract expressionistic style in which forms and colors express impressions and feelings in a modern and contemporary way. Joseph Oberberger for Regensburg in 1985, and works from Professor Hans Gottfried von Stockhausen for the Ulm Cathedral in 1986. It's also one important undertaking by Meyer and Zettler studios were the reconstitution of destroyed or disappeared works, especially the castle near Cologne, and it was reconstruction by Zettler Studios, and there were still in their archives books with illustration of the original works that could be used for a reconstruction of those stained glass panels. We can see here images from the North artists, which are pictures from the Meyer books that we still have in the archives of Meyer House. Here, also a new cartoon with paintwork. Another work which was more recent was the work for St. Francis Church in Valdivia in Chile, a stained glass window by the Meyer Studio in 1925, destroyed by a fire in 2013. Reconstruction was between 2014 and 2015 in collaboration with the Espacio Transparente lab from Valparaiso in Chile. We can see on the left-hand side the original stained glass prior to destruction, and on the right-hand side reconstruction, 2014-2015. Another recent work was for the Mexico City, the Our Lady of the Angels Church, stained glass windows by the Zettler Studio from 1906. Due to a devastating earthquake in 2017, the church dome suffered severe structural damage, and 3 of its 8 stained glass windows were completely destroyed. Also, the Meyer archives had surviving books with illustrations from the original projects that could be used for reconstruction. One of the 3 panels reconstructed is shown here. Conservation and restoration projects. The St. Michael's Protestant Church in Hof, Germany, Zettler Studios stained glass from 1890, restored by the Meyer Studio in 1982. And also the Church of the Assumption of Mary in Fort Worth, in Texas, a stained glass window dating from 1924, restored in 2009. Also in Chile, the Palace of Justice in Santiago de Chile. This project from Meyer Studios, 1907, and this project declined. The Chilean Ministry of Justice requested that the restoration be entrusted to the original manufacturer of the stained glass window. The proposal was approved by the National Monuments Council, and the restoration took place in Germany, while installation on site in Santiago was undertaken by a local company under our supervision. An important part in the stained glass production of Meyer Studios, we also have works for Brazil, as we're familiar. Here in Rio de Janeiro, the Church of Candelaria, stained glass windows by Zettler Studio, 1898. Another important piece of work was stained glass windows for the Municipal Theater, Meyer Studio, 1909. Also, the Monastery of São Bento in Rio de Janeiro, stained glass windows by the Meyer Studio in 1928. A detail from one of the stained glass panels, and also for the Church of the Sacred Heart of Jesus in Petropolis in 1900. We are aware that the artist to draw the drawings were Martin from, and we can see on the left-hand side that at the time the angels were practicing to take part in the FIFA World Cup, World Football Cup, but it was not possible to take part in the World Cup so far. Other stained glass windows from Zettler Studios from 1925 at the life of St. Anthony. Other stained glass windows on the life of St. Anthony, and we're aware that the stained glass windows were produced for Rio de Janeiro, but we don't know which church for. Perhaps somebody here has that information. Other stained glass windows by the Zettler Studio for Our Lady of Peace Church in Ipanema, the Life of the Virgin Mary for Our Lady of Peace Church. Here pictures of stained glass prior to being sent to Brazil for assembly. And here We have them installed in the Church of Our Lady of Peace. In São Paulo, the monastery of São Bento, Meyer Studio stained glass from 1912 as well. Another church in São Paulo, Saint Cecilia Church, and a contemporary work which Christian talked about beforehand, stained glass by Sir Brian Clark, produced between 1995 and 1997 for Norte Shopping. Brian Clark, British artist, created a composition covering approximately 970 square meters of colored mouth-blown glass for North Shopping in Rio de Janeiro. And they are similar to computer software. And plaqué glass was treated with acid, with the color enamel, and assembled according to the traditional technique. On the left-hand side, in the center, we have a stained glass, blown glass, and around it, it was a mosaic. General overviews of the Meyer studios. Nowadays, there is a wide variety of modern techniques for design for glass, float glass or mouth-blown glass, and through digital printing or sandblasting, hand painting or aerographers, or a combination of such techniques. Using those, we can find many new possibilities in the art of stained glass. New techniques for contemporary architectures. As an example here, painting on float glass. One of the first works where this technique was used was the Frei Otto tent in the diplomatic club in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia between 1985 and 1986. The painted and tempered float glass panels suspended, they evoked the richly decorated desert tent of the Arab world. Frei Otto was responsible for the building of a sports stadium for the Munich Olympics Games in 1972. Each glass panel measures approximately 33 by 33 centimeters and are suspended beneath a flexible steel cable structure. The pavilion measures 17 meters in diameter and 7.5 meters in height. The installation consists of 8mm float glass panels painted with vitreous enamels, fired several times, and the kiln was finally toughened. In total, the project comprises approximately 1,900 individual glass panels. Traditional techniques for historic buildings. Piece of work by artist Sir Brian Clark, the Abbaye de la Fille-Dieu in Romont in Switzerland from 1997. The traditional techniques of leaded stained glass have continued to evolve through the use of colored vitreous enamels and acid-etched plaqué glass. Although these technique methods were already well established, they have become the principal means of artistic expression nowadays. As a result, the lead cames forming the structural grid have become increasingly more discrete, allowing color and light to dominate the composition. Here, an overview of the inside. And it's quite special because usually in churches we don't see colored glass, and this was very interesting. Also, another contemporary work from the year 2000, the Sacred Heart of Jesus Church in Munich, Alexander Belishenko, The blue portals, 16-meter high portals, symbolize the Gospel of John, coding letters in symbols of nails using a computer program for translating the text in these symbols of nails. Letters are printed in colored glass and fused. So the blue of the portal fuses with the blue color of the sky in a game of architecture, interplay of architecture and nature. We can see detail of the code. Another piece for the Faculty of Law in Hamburg in Germany in the year 2005, a combination of sandblasting and kilned fire ceramic colors applied to float glass. Float glass is produced allowing molten glass to float on a bath of molten tin. This process creates perfectly flat glass with a uniform thickness, making it the standard architectural glass used throughout the world today. It's also referred to simply as flat glass. Not all flat glass are manufactured using the float process, though. The standard sheet size in Europe is 6 meters by 3 meters. Another work with float glass for the Church of St. Florian in Munich from 2006, Stations of the Cross by artist Horst Thurheimer. Here we can see the artist himself painted his design over the glasses, hand painted with ceramic enamels, kiln fired ceramic colors and float glass. And there's a lot of works with the blown glass. Lutheran Church in Saarlouis in Germany, originally built in 1906, with work from 2010 by artist Saskia Schultz. Mouth-blown plaqué glass treated by sandblasting to create this delicate floral motifs. Panel were then assembled using the traditional leaded stained glass technique. Another work for the Linde company, headquarters from 2010, artist Joachim Young. There's currently no other material in the visual arts that offers as many creative possibilities as float glass. Modern industry supplies float glass in an unlimited range of sizes and thickness. It's possible to apply images, colors, and patterns of all imaginable forms to float glass using digital printing technologies, industrial reproduction methods, or traditional artistic techniques of painting and drawing. Artists are able to paint on float glass with vitreous enamels almost as freely and spontaneously as they paint on canvas. But blown glass is a very important material today for the production of glass in architecture, stained glass for contemporary architecture. Here, a piece of work by artist Martin Donnan for the Indianapolis International Airport in Indiana, in the USA from 2010. And it uses mouth-blown glass panels, partially painted with vitreous enamels and partly treated by acid etching or sandblasting. They were laminated onto float glass using a two-component structure, silicone adhesive. And in this case, there are no lead cames because glass was directly glued over float glass.
Here we see some images from the cut glass over a light table. And here's the final result. We have other works, such as this pavilion in the city of Hamburg. The graphic designs were transferred onto float glass. Here, another work by Brian Clark, The Pyramid of Peace. This is located in Astana, in Kazakhstan, built in 2006, and through the collaboration of architects, Forter, and partners. And this work was executed using screen printing technique on glass. Here's the Church of St. Martin in the Fields in London, United Kingdom, in 2008, from the studio Shiraze Hushiari. And this concept combines a delicate steel framework with mouth-bone glass, bringing together religious symbolism and sophisticated architectural design. And the result is a monochromatic composition that creates a unique atmosphere of light within the interior. Here's a work by Stern Brothers at the South Ferry Terminal in New York City from 2008, using glass fusion techniques, which is a process in which two or more pieces of glass are fused together in the cone to create a single element. And this technique allows artists to produce glass with a wide variety of colors, textures, and relief effects, and requires considerable technical expertise, as well as compatible materials for the fusing. And large architectural projects also demand highly specialized equipment. In this work, part of it was built using Mosaic. Here is another work for the Federal Courthouse in Buffalo, New York, by Robert Mangold, using design applied to float glass using a combination of hand painting and airbrushing. Another work by Stern Brothers, which is glass sculptures for Princeton University, New Jersey, in 2015, combining digital ceramic printing with traditional hand painting on 2 sheets of float glass that were laminated together and then subsequently bonded to acid-etched plaqué glass. And digital printing transfer a digital image directly onto the glass surface by means of an inkjet printing system. And this is using ceramic colors, which allows to be fused into the glass during firing. So they are generally opaque or translucent effects rather than completely transparent. Here we see the work of Shirin Kretschmann in the City Hall of Freiburg in Germany in 2017, painting of float glass using opaque ceramic colors, and the glass panels are installed in front of a solid wall, therefore illuminated exclusively by natural ambient light. Another work by Ellsworth Kelly for the Blanton Museum of Art. It is a transcendental chapel in the city of Austin, Texas, built in 2017. And the artist Ellsworth Kelly described the project saying, "It is truly a chapel dedicated to creativity. That's how I see it. It is a secular chapel." And the composition consists of 3 stained glass windows, comprising a total of 33 individual panels, each constructed from 4 layers of colored mouth-blown glass. And every color and shape was developed specifically according to the artist's vision. And we need to say that in this case, the glass pieces itself, they were mouth-blown in a special size defined by the artist. Usually we do 60 by 90, but these were 70 centimeters per 1 meter in size. So usually contemporary art use several types of stained glass windows. Here we see the Basílica de la Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, Spain. And this is done by Joan Vila y Grau Studio in 2010. In the history of stained glass making, we can say that from the 20th century onwards, we see a new, renewed enthusiasm for glass making, and then stained glass art has been redefined thanks to new techniques and new artistic and social significance. Traditionally associated with ecclesiastical art, stained glass became one of the leading forms of decorative and architectural art. And individual artists gained more recognition alongside studios and manufacturers in the execution. Here we see the Magnificat in the the San Francisco de Padua Church, a work by Adolfo Witernitz, the Magnificat, made in Lima, Peru. This was done in dalle de verre. So it's a concrete stained glass and done in 1967. This was executed by Maison Chiara in Lausanne, Switzerland. For contemporary arts, before the contemporary techniques, we used a lot of the traditional techniques of leaded stained glass, but using in an expressive and constructivist manner that reflected the artistic language of the period. But at the same time, new techniques emerged, which is, one of them is the glass slabs, or dalle de verre, or concrete glass as well, you can call it. And in this technique, the thick pieces of colored glass are embedded in concrete instead of joined by lead cames. So you have this distinctive quality resulting from the refraction of light in the fracture edges of the thick glass, and the combination of concrete and glass allows the wall and window to merge into architectural elements. And so we create a very uniform surface with no need for the frames. Here we see works by Matthias Goeritz. One is the Dome of St. Lawrence Church in Mexico City from the 1950s, and the other for the Metropolitan Cathedral of Mexico City in 1960. Another example, works from Georg Meistermann for the St. Gideon Church in Cologne in 1985, executed by Dr. Oitman Studio in Munich, Germany. Here are works by Johannes Schreiter for the Church of the Holy Spirit in Heidelberg, executed by Derek's studio. And also Marc Chagall's All Saints Church stained glass, executed by Charles Marc Studio in Reims, France. Here you already know it. On the left we see Brasilia Cathedral with stained glass done by conceived by Marianne Peretti, restored in 2009 by the Luigi and Gonçalves Atelier. On the right side we see the San Sebastian Cathedral, the Metropolitan Cathedral of Rio de Janeiro, done by Lorenz Halmer. Here's another example. The Cosmo stained glass, or Cosmo Vitral, in Toluca, Mexico, conceived by Leopoldo Flores from 1978 to 1980, executed by Bernabe Fernandez Studio. Another impressive work by Narciso Squaliata in Mexico, from Mexico, and for the Formosa Boulevard station in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, in 2007, executed by Atelier Derek's in Germany, the Derek's studio in Germany, combining glass fusing and mouth-blown glass. Here's another important example. We see some mosaic works. We see the work by Meyer Studio, the mosaic workshop we have. Here is the work by Stefan Huber for the Deutsche Bundesbank Mosaic in Frankfurt. Other mosaics include the ones for Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, done in 2005, as well as Geneviève Cadieux from Canada for the Paris Metro in 2011. Another interesting piece of work is the one done by Vic Muniz, who is a Brazilian artist residing in New York, and he did mosaic installations for the New York City subway in 2013. Here's an example of what we can currently achieve in terms of contemporary works for churches. And so it's a contemporary work in a historic building. We see the Lutheran Church of St. Luke in Munich, originally built between 1893 and 1896. And the Meyer Studio stained glass windows were originally produced at around the same time, with designs from Franz William Dixon. Here's the Nativity stained glass, the Nativity window, and also the Ascension of Christ window. These are designs that we found in our archives, but the original stained glass works were destroyed in 1943 during the war. But now, recently in 2005, we found the original cartoons by Francis William Dixon, the artist. In this case, we see the Ascension of Christ window cartoon discovered in the archives. And now we can use the original design. And the original pieces, they had uncolored glass. The remains of the original windows had only discolored glass. And we were able to work on the reconstruction of one and the restoration of the other window based on the original cartoons. And therefore, we could build a new stained glass window based on the original cartoon. And the expanding red center of the rosetta of the rose window may be interpreted as the Big Bang, in the beginning of the universe, because red symbolizes birth, creative energy, and the origin of life. Here's the second window, the Ascension of Christ window. And the golden structural grid radiating from the center may be understood as representing the order created by humankind, but at the same time it forms the architectural framework that unifies the entire composition. And blue symbolizes purity, transcendence, and the heavens. And the artistic challenge was to integrate the surviving original drawings into a coherent composition while remaining faithful to the historic design. So we wanted to create a new work, but not to copy the original concept, the original design. There were a lot of details missing. Therefore, we needed the collaboration of the artist, Heiner Dion, and he worked for our company in Munich, and that's how we produced a new stained glass, combining float glass, enamel painting, and modern technology. In conclusion, I want to say something that my boss, Graham Meyer, used to repeat a lot. We need art in architecture as much as our daily bread, but it must be good art. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Walter, for your brilliant presentation. We now open for Q&A. So we invite the audience in the room and on Zoom to ask your questions, please.
Agradecer o conteúdo.
Firstly, I would like to thank you for the lecture. It was very enriching and inspiring. We could see several examples of how contemporary art making can integrate into traditional techniques of glass making and stained glass making. I would love to go back to some of the pictures that shows the mosaics. But I have two questions. Firstly, when you collaborate with contemporary artists, sometimes these artists are not familiarized with the techniques of glass painting or preservation of glass artwork. Do you have to put the craftsman and the artist together, working together in the bench to achieve the desired outcomes? Do you ever do that? Also, as a restorer, I know documentation is of the utmost importance for historical records and for our restoration work. So I was curious to know, how do you organize and preserve the archives at Meyer? How do you store the pieces? How do you organize the catalogs? All the different pieces. I can only imagine it is difficult for you to keep up with all the different works and where they are located throughout the world. Thank you, Marisa, for the questions. So firstly, the first question, how do we collaborate with artists? Many artists today, whenever they have a project that involves stained glass, they already have some technical knowledge on the glass making products. However, it is not always the case. Sometimes they only have the design, the idea, but when they get to the company, they come to see us and we start talking. We need to explain all the different possibilities that the techniques may offer, such as the mouth-blown glass and float glass, mosaic, and so on and so forth. So the collaboration already starts by this explanation, and we need to figure out how the collaboration may take place and if it's possible at all. Sometimes we need to convince the artist that their idea is impossible to produce. And we need to explain that in order to achieve that sort of result, there is a lot of money involved, sometimes surpassing the existing budget. Therefore, we need to come up with different solutions for the artists. On other instances, we have works commissioned by public entities. So we will need to go through bidding rounds, and we are faced with budget limitations. So all these technical aspects surrounding the production, such as the transportation of the products the installation. All of these aspects need to be described and presented to the client, to the artist. Oftentimes, clients ask us for a stained glass window, and we need to explain to this client that some things are possible to do, some are not. Maybe we can find a more suitable artist to help the artist, to help the client reach their vision. We can sometimes make a bridge between the artist and the client. And we present some options to the client, and therefore they are better equipped to find the best solution as well. In regards to your second question, it is indeed a bit complicated. During World War II, many of the records, the historical records, were destroyed at Maya. The remains that we did find after the war were quite limited. And we still don't have complete information on our past work. Even today, we found recently some windows in Brazil we didn't know of they exist at all. So we were not aware of their existence. And sometimes we are shown pictures of stained glasses windows, and people want to know whether these were built by us or not, produced by us or not. And sometimes it's impossible to tell by the pictures alone. Sometimes by comparing the images from other publications, other books, we sometimes can make a comparison and establish whether that window was produced by Maya or not. But all our cartoons and books are stored in a safe place today in our premises. Andrea already has been there, and we're getting help from them to catalog and analyze all the materials. And of course, these records also need restoration work. So in order to be preserved for the future, they are of utmost importance for us. Walter, I would like to know that if you take the artist and the artist is also a client, right? And sometimes they can be very tricky, they require a lot of effort to be pleased. So what would you say to artists that are interested in glassmaking? What would you advise these artists to maybe go through training, to go to art school and know more about stained glass production techniques so they can become better clients? Of course, and I also invite clients and artists alike to come visit our company to better understand the techniques, to visualize how the techniques take place. And we can also offer consulting and analysis of the designs they have come up with so they can achieve the desired results. Sometimes designs are a bit off the charts, they are impossible to realize, and they give us a lot of work in this stage, but we are always very happy to welcome the artists and clients to come to visit us and get to know all the techniques better to support their work. Hello, I would be curious to hear about something that came up in the presentations. So you mentioned that the eyes of Our Lady and the Jesus Christ child in the Candelaria windows were done by cold painting because the pieces could not be fired anymore. So I guess these cold paintings they are very, it is very plastic. They are made by polymers. They are very different from fire painting results. So I was wondering whether cold painting is used only for restoration purposes. Yes, only for restoration purposes, because it is, of course, it depends on the technique of the type of glass. It could be mouth-blown, whether it's mouth-blown glass or flute glass. You need to fire the glass. You need to take it to the kiln, to the furnace. Also, for safety reasons, glass needs to be durable and resistant for safety concerns, and therefore the firing is a must. But currently you have digital printing techniques available, and also acrylic paint on glass. But these won't be fired. They cannot withstand the heat. So these digital techniques, they are used on laminated glass. So the painting is actually placed within 2 sheets of glass, and it is therefore protected. Otherwise, the painting is not durable enough. If you just place it on top of a window, it won't last. In a stained glass window, which receives light all the time, it won't be durable. So in the case of the saint, wouldn't there be the possibility of applying the painting to the float glass to have it fired and then apply the glass on top of the existing window? Yes, the painting used paraloids and pigments. This method of paraloid painting allows for a future removal if by any chance other techniques come up in the future. Of course, applying the glass on top would protect the painting, the cold painting as well. But this is very localized. You need to think it's only being applied to the eyes of the figures in the panel. So if you need any touch-ups, you can use a glass of the same size, apply the painting on this piece of glass, fire that piece of glass, and apply it on the exterior of the existing window. That's also a possibility. Maybe we can ask you this again tomorrow, right? After your next lecture. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Hello, Walter. Good afternoon. So I have a very basic question. What is the float glass? Could you explain what is float glass? Float glass is the same glass you find in any regular window. It's the most commonly industrially produced window of 2 to 4 millimeters in thickness. You can cut it. You can make protective glazing or tempered glass out of it. And you also have the possibility of applying artistic designs by painting or screen printing or digital printing or sandblasting. There are several techniques and new techniques actually that allow a lot of variety, and also it allows for large architectural windows to be built using this technique of float glass. Of course, it will depend on the technique employed by the artist. You can do beautiful things out with it, and you can do horrendous pieces with float glass. So it really depends on the artist's ability and vision. Well, if you want to hear more about the glass making techniques in Brazil, we do have a technical association for glassmakers in Brazil, a Bividro, and they offer information on their website about float, the crystal glass. We have all kinds of glass currently made in Brazil can be found on the Abividro website. And the magazine is published by Abravidro, two different organizations. So the Technical Association of the Glassmaking Industry, Abividro, very well done website, by the way. And then you have Abravidro, which are the producers and also artists that work with glass, and they have this publication on a regular basis. And so they are not necessarily the producers, but those that work with glass, with printing, molding. So these are two different associations of two different skills, but you can find it online.
I apologize, the question is not being asked using the microphone. It started being produced in the 50s. Here. It's called float because after it's done, it's launched into a pool of water where it floats. And on one of the sides, there's tin so that it floats. And it's flat because it floats. So it was called float because it floats. And it was cut. It can be up to 6 by 3 meter panels, and it's cut and goes to our window. Float glass started being produced in the 1950s, but prior to that also this glass existed, but there were other techniques for production. Different kinds of techniques were used. So glass was not always perfectly flat. And the technique of float glass is the one produced for most situations. After it's molten, it's immersed in tin and it floats. This is why it's called floats. It floats until it reaches the dimension of 6 by 3 meters. And sometimes there's companies that might produce panels of up to 15 meters of width, 3 meters by 15 meters. The question was asked not using the microphone. Only the answer, not the question. Cadoro makes blown glass if you order it, Cadora in São Paulo. And if you order flat, they do it. This is not their main line of production, but they may do it. I ordered glass myself there. It depends on your individual project. Cadoro from the city of Poços de Caldas, and the state of Rio Grande do Sul as well. You could blow glass, but for hollow glass, Abividro has two sections, hollow glass and flat glass. Hollow glass for packaging, pots, glasses, decoration, and flat glass is for windows. But there's blown glass as well. But it's way cheaper to bring it from abroad in the case of flat glass for stained glass, except in the case you wish for a very specific, special color, not available here. Unfortunately, the questions are not being asked on the microphone. And, oh, you ask about colored? Then it's produced by Cadoro, yes. We have a final question, which is from the online audience. Marina, it's quite an interesting question. It's related to our restoration solutions in the design when cutting lead is planned for. Besides the natural contour lines for the image, what else must be taken into account to place the cuts? Where to place the lead games? Where to cut glass? And where to place lead games? Normally there are many options, and the designer might design the stained glass in the case of traditional stained glass, or it could be contemporary stained glass, also including lead lines. But the artist should provide the design in such a way that glass may be cut, so that it may also be assembled using lead. And there's many things that we need to be informed about, how to produce that kind of stained glass panel. And quite often, the artists, at least on those days in the 19th century, they would do the design in any way, and the company, with their experts, would change the design so that it would be possible to be done. Because artists should know their side, and the craftsman and the company will know that, oh, the design has an image of some person, of a head, and then the design should be in a way that it doesn't have a cut in the middle of the head. So this is part of the experience of the craftsman and the company, and sometimes the artist is not familiar with it. So it's a collaboration. It used to be a collaboration work between the artist and the craftsman. Thank you, Walter.